When real men can't sleep, real men get up and do the news. I want to get a few stories in before I start fault lines this morning. Um, I saw the story yesterday and didn't get the opportunity to do it, so let's do it now. The United States. So a poll was taken around the world. 53 countries, what, 50,000 people, give or take. And various questions, but one of the questions, one of the most interesting ones, was what do you believe, or what country do you believe is the biggest threat to democracy? Well, first, the overwhelming majority of the countries prefer democracy. So the argument that Biden is making about it's against autocracy versus democracy, well, from the standpoint of the population, that's not necessarily where it's from. Even though you could say against this kind of Game of Thrones of sorts for global domination, that maybe that's where their head is. But on top of that, what country do you believe is the greatest threat to democracy? And of course, the United States wins this. Now, I know there are going to be a lot of people in the United States that are shocked by this. Oh, what do you mean we're a threat to democracy? We're freedom and democracy. I mean, we have freedom of navigation exercises. I mean, we're freedom and democracy. We're the only thing that keeps this world from falling apart into a basket case of fire and people punching each other in the eye. It's us. How dare you say we're a threat to democracy? Well, 44% of the population around the world, at the very least the people who were polled in the 53 countries, believed that the United States was the largest or the biggest threat to democracy. Now, for those Americans that are shocked by this, I'm going to explain why those countries believe that the United States is one of the biggest threats to democracy. There's big tech, that's one of them, that's inequality. But the big tech and inequality is one of those things that are in various countries. And the ability to shut Donald Trump off, for example, is startling. I mean, a lot of people in the United States accepted it because it was Donald Trump. But there are countries around the globe that don't like Trump and still don't find this to be a good idea. France and Germany being two of them. Do you really want, meaning if the social media is really going to be our commons, do you really want an unaccountable body to just snap their fingers and it goes off? And think about what we're saying with that. There are going to be some people who are more favorable in the political class, and those people may be closer to the people who can cut it off or get a story suppressed. Let's say like the Hunter Biden story, you find out it's true and they suppressed it before the election. That should be a much bigger scandal than what it is. And so, no, I mean, I think it's maddening that we're okay with this, and yet here we are. We need to either make a decision on what our commons means in this day and time, and I would say it means social media. But nevertheless, I want to get a little bit into the poll, and I want to explain to Americans why the world may see you as the largest threat to democracy, despite your mainstream media and your political class continuously, breathlessly telling you we have freedom and democracy. We are love and light. That's what we are. And yet, that's not being taken that way abroad. That propaganda is only for public consumption. Now, yes, Biden may get out here and say whatever he's going to say, or the people in America, or Pompeo, or Blinken may say what they're going to say. But the rest of the world is far more aware of America's actions around the globe than Americans are aware of Americans' actions around the globe. The media in this country blissfully forgets various segments and information that would help Americans to have somewhat of a larger contextual view of their world. But because of that, there may be blind spots. And so I want to fill in some of those blind spots to people that may be shocked and perturbed that they're saying this about us. And just so you can see the poll, I'm not making it up, right here. So, Alliance for Democracy Foundation. The page is freezing. Don't freeze. Stupid page. Come on, come on, come on, come on. All right, let's try this again. Yes, I get it. So right here, perhaps the most startling finding is nearly 44% of respondents in the 53 countries surveyed are concerned that the U.S. threatens democracy in their country. They fear China influence is 38% and Russian influence 28%. So think about it. The United States acts as if Putin is God-man and he's ever present, he's everywhere. Anything that takes place around the world that is in any way nefarious, it is either China, Russia, or Iran, and all of them are doing things to attack us and this pristine democracy that just stands here and tries to fight and protect democracies around the globe. That's what's taking place. How dare they say that we're a threat to democracy and Russia is not? You may have a lot of people in this country, especially the woke left, and honestly, the political and media class, that will be shocked by this result. Perish the thought. I can't believe they said that about us. Last year, the perception of U.S. influence as a threat to democracy around the world has increased significantly from a net opinion of +6 to a net opinion of 14 or +14. This increase is particularly high in Germany with +20 and China with +16. Well, of course China will feel that way because we've been attacking them relentlessly. But Germany? Aid to Germany? Well, why wouldn't Germany feel that way? Let's do this. Let's flip and then we'll talk about it. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you allowing me to do it. Look, if you want to know what the rest of the world thinks about you, it's sometimes interesting when you see the results and you question, well, why do they think that about us? What are we projecting to the world where they're coming to the conclusion that we're a threat to democracy? We're freedom and democracy. How dare you say we're a threat to democracy? And yet, 44% of the world believes that, or at the very least in this particular poll. And I got to be honest, I can't necessarily say they're wrong. If you're looking at Germany for the moment, the United States has been interfering with Nord Stream 2. Now, Germany needs gas. They need energy. Nord Stream 2 is going to provide this. The United States doesn't want Germany to go through with this, despite the fact that the United States accepts oil or gas from Russia itself. I think it's like their third largest import. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. How are you saying Germany can't do that, but we can do it? How weird is that? Well, in one case, they want to buy her. In another case, it has to do with Ukraine and Ukraine's ability to get a certain amount of resources. And Ukraine being the bulwark that the United States is using against Russia right now. But more importantly, for Germany, it's an issue of sovereignty. And it's an issue that's being basically trying to be overrode, where the U.S. is basically blowing off what Germany is saying about something that it's its own sovereign right to decide. Yeah, I can imagine they would have issues with that. Also, fast forward to the Iraq War, where 1 million Iraqis killed. You have ISIS that basically is spawned from that, killing tens of thousands of human beings. You have the Syrian war that the United States instigated, where Obama spent like $1 billion, if not more, in order to try to get rid of Assad with this weird strategy of, okay, we're going to attack Assad and we're going to attack certain terrorist groups while aligning with other terrorist groups to do that. It's very weird. It didn't work. It failed miserably. But what he did succeed in doing, rationally, people said, okay, it's dangerous to live here in the war zone, so I'm going to pick my belongings, and I'm going to get on the boat, and I'm going to sail to Germany. Now, Germany was getting refugees to the tune of like millions. And it got to the point where Germany had to turn many of these refugees away. But Europe also was getting these refugees. It wasn't just Germany, and I know Germany is part of Europe, but you get my point. All of these people basically flooded Europe. They flooded Europe because they were fleeing the violence that had taken place as a result of the wars that the United States has propagated in the Middle East. On top of that, when they flooded into Europe, the politics of Europe destabilized. You had many right-wing governments that were able to basically gain, let's say, a foothold, to gain leverage, pushing back against the issue of immigration, especially some of the areas that were created by not tending to the immigrants that were brought into the country, meaning allowing cesspools or whatever to form in immigrant areas that created difficulties in the countries themselves, especially with the public perception of those immigrants coming into the country. Not to mention, there's also going to be just differences in opinion in regards to things like religion or even things like culture and the way that they engage. And so, of course, there are going to be conflicts and blowups. But understand what primary here is the war and the people fleeing those wars. And this is somewhat, if you think about it, a common theme. I mean, think for the moment to Venezuela. The United States has basically said Juan Guaido is the leader of a country that the United States has no rationale to do that. Meaning the people of that country decide who they want. The U.S. doesn't like that person, so the U.S. says Juan Guaido is going to be that guy. It's astonishing and breathtaking, and yet that is taking place. That is a breathtaking ignoring of another country's sovereign right to exist. Yes, especially if you're in South America. What about Zelaya, where you had Manuel Zelaya in Honduras kicked out, with Clinton backing the guy being kicked out? Well, the guy who's in there now is one of the people that the United States typically like. He's our guy, and he's also apparently heavily involved in cocaine. And his job, apparently, was to get cocaine into the nose of every American, every gringo, as they call it. That's our guy. We didn't like the dirtbag lefty. We didn't like that guy. So now, 80% of the cocaine that runs from South America goes through Honduras. What about Bolivia? Same thing. We didn't like that guy. And not just not like that guy. We didn't even report honestly when a coup took place that got him out of office, especially since many of the people, or there were all sorts of links connecting the U.S. to the people that were propagating the coup. Is it possible that that's why it wasn't necessarily heavily reported here? And one of the other things that you need to realize, whether you're talking about Iraq, whether you're talking about Libya, I mean, we chest thump as if those things were positive developments or positive wars. And as if these were positive things that all of these people were dying. They're selling slaves in Libya as a result of our blowing that country to bits. Whether it's South America, whether it's the Middle East, we have a history and a record in those countries that is bloody as all hell, and we don't talk about it honestly. And what's scary about it is that media is complicit in it. So there's no backstop. It's not like you have an independent media that talks about independent things. If you think about it, media is just basically stenographers. A story comes out, media runs it. You find out in 2 or 3 days that the story was false, and media says, okay, we got it wrong, and they keep it moving. As if there's no introspection or thought of, hey, maybe the spooks that are giving us this data is not giving us always accurate data. And that the data they give us is to push the public attention in a particular direction. That's what it seems like. They never do that. It's unquestioned almost. And at this point, they even put out stuff that was like barely sourced. I mean, the New York Times puts out, Washington Post puts out an article on Giuliani, talking about Giuliani was briefed that Russian disinformation was trying to get to him and trying to basically give him bad data. Now, come to find out, this never happened. And yet the New York Times said they independently verified the story that never happened. That's our media today. It's comically naive. And it seems to go in a very specific direction when it doesn't like a particular political person. And this is straight news. And so when people around the world are looking at the actions of the country, where in the US the context is often dropped, around the world the context is not necessarily often dropped. They see what the US does, they see the monsters in the cupboard, and yeah, if you were one of those countries that needed oil and the US is, or needed gas and the US says, yeah, I don't like that. And you have to have this kind of pitched battle for something that is so your own sovereignty. If you are in the UK and the country decides it wants 5K or 5G technology, and then the US says, yeah, we don't think that you should do that. And then all of a sudden your country decides that it doesn't want to get something that it vitally needs, just because of competition with the United States and the US putting them on an naughty list. If you are Brazil and the United States says, hey, I know that all of those people are dying, hundreds of thousands of people are dying, but we don't want you to use or do or work with these states, Russia, Venezuela, or Cuba. And right here, the United States government agencies coordinated to strengthen diplomatic ties and offer technical and humanitarian assistance to dissuade countries in the region from accepting aid from these ill-intentioned states. This includes the OGA's health attaché office to persuade Brazil to reject Russia's COVID vaccine, and a CDC to technical assistance in lieu of Panama accepting offering for Cuban doctors. Brazil has, at this point, is a health emergency with what, 2 or 3 worst in the world, and you're turning down a vaccine. That's astonishing. And from the standpoint of Panama, well, again, the country is in need of medical assistance and you're willing to turn down doctors? I mean, these people are basically taking steps and actions that are not in the best interest of their country for the foreign policy goals and objective of the United States. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. And yet, that's what's happening. So when those countries look at this and they say, yeah, we're concerned about this, that's why. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Thanks all.